What is the most bizarre thing you've caught yourself doing after your brain's autopilot misfired? I dropped my pants when going through TSA. For those who fly in the super early morning, it can be rough. I purposely didn't drink coffee so I could sleep on the plane. I was on the security line and did the normal routine of taking stuff out of my pockets and putting them in my laptop bag. Then off with the shoes, placed on top of my luggage. Then off comes the belt as usual. Then of course when you take off your belt you take off your pants. Nope. Damn it. Put them back on, and what the duck for a moment as I finished up in security. Luckily not that many people fly at like 4:30 am. Yup, been there, except I always take my shirt off after my shoes, so I did that instead. I started to unbutton my shirt, and the FFS, why was she attractive? TSA lady was like, slow down sir, we just met. I didn't know they came with a sense of humor. Was jogging late at night. A guy reached out his hand in front of me as I passed. I high-fived him. Turns out he was hailing a taxi. As a teenager, I worked at McDonald's. My McDonald's was 24 hours, and, during the summer, I worked the overnight shift. My sleep schedule would get all messed up. My parents woke me up for dinner one evening. I zombie walked to the table and sat down. My dad asked me to say grace. I bow my head and say, "Thank you for choosing McDonald's. May I take your order?" Rubbed aftershave in my hair and put gel on my face. The worst part was that after I put the aftershave in my hair, I laughed at myself, thought, duck, what was all that about? And then added the hair gel to my skin. After an 8-hour day of cashiering at Target, which has so many robotic small talk conversations, I stopped at the dollar store. The conversation went something like, "Cashier, hi, how are you?" Me, "But, how are you?" Cashier, "I'm good, thanks." Me, "That's good. Did you find everything okay today?" That conversation was had to the effect of everyone in line, and the cashier looking at me like I was psycho. I delivered pizza for Domino's, and I caught myself multiple times at the customer's door saying, "Hi, thanks for calling Domino's. How can I help you?" I took the metro home, then realized I drove to work. That was a long night. That sounds like a problem for morning you. Cup of coffee in left hand, phone in the right hand. Go to my room, take a sip of my phone, and throw coffee on the bed. I picked up my toothbrush to brush my teeth, but I also had the urge to piss, so I obviously tossed my toothbrush into the toilet. After getting my toothbrush, I'll occasionally grab the deodorant instead of the toothpaste, and stare at it for a minute while my brain tries to figure out how one is supposed to go on the other. Once, I was laying in bed very tired watching TV. All the characters on the show piled into a car together, and I thought for a second, shit, I forgot to put my seatbelt on, before realizing I was safely in bed and nowhere near a car. I tried to mail my buddy a check, and it had been a while since I mailed anything. Long enough to forget how mail works apparently. What I did was, I wrote my name and address in the center, and his name in the upper left hand corner. The letter then got returned to me. But still, my first thought wasn't, whoops, I failed at mailing this check. Instead it was, well I guess this stamp is old, and the price of stamps went up. So I put another stamp on it and sent it again, to myself, again. My mailman must think I'm retarded. I once wrote a card to my mom and gave it to my sister to give to her, since she would see her on the day and I wouldn't. She accidentally posted it without thinking. On the front of the envelope it just said, "Mom." I often wonder what the mail people thought of that one. I sat there at an intersection in suburban Palo Alto at 11 PM, patiently waiting for the stop sign to change. I sat at a green light for a full cycle, waiting for it to change to red once. Cars were backed up for a block or two. Christ, people sure love honking their horns today. When I was in high school and living on the family farm, I used to feed the horses and barn cats every morning. Waking up at 6 AM for this as a 16-year-old guaranteed that I was half asleep. So, I grabbed the cat food like I always did, walked to the table where my cat's bowl was, like I always did, and poured some in. My cat always jumped up on the table right away to start eating right away, and one morning as something jumped up in front of me, I absent-mindedly pet it as usual. The hair felt a little rough, so I looked down, and instead of my friendly orange cat, there was a skunk. Just chilling there eating the cat food while I pet its back. There was a 6.0 earthquake at about 3 AM, so I was asleep. The quake lasted 20 seconds, and I woke up about 16 seconds in, standing in the hallway hugging a vase. What the duck? Somewhat related story here. During a similar earthquake, my girlfriend, who is a light sleeper, woke up pretty much as soon as the shaking started, and yelled as fast as she could say, "Hey, wake up. There's an earthquake." What do we do? I heard everything she said, but I'm a pretty heavy sleeper, so in my panic and drowsiness, all I could think was to say, "Stop, drop and roll." I guess my half asleep mind remembered that from elementary school when they teach us what to do if you're ever on fire. Of course I don't do it, as I'm still trying to wake up and gain motor functions, but my girlfriend in her panic and probably semi-drowsiness, rolls off the bed and literally, stops, drops, and rolls on our bedroom floor until she's fully awake, a few seconds after the earthquake stopped. Then she proceeds to yell at me for playing a prank on her while she was half asleep and scared. By this point I'm still in bed and can't move due to the laughter at watching her do it. I didn't actually want or try to prank her, it was just the only thing my brain thought to say, but to this day she thinks I did it to duck with her. It still makes me cry with laughter every time I think about it. Drove 20 minutes to my old house after I moved, was just zoning out. I lived in the same building my first 2 years of college. First day I was in a new place, I ended up at the old building, and it took me 7 to 8 swipes to figure out why my key card wasn't letting me in. You're lucky. I got off a red eye and drove almost 2 hours to my old home, only to wonder what the duck was going on, when a guy pulled into the drive in front of me and went in the front door of my house. Had the dread that maybe my wife was cheating on me somehow, and this was one of those come home early and catch her in the act. I'm devastated for a minute, then angry, then resigned to at least see it to conclusion. Then I realize I ducking moved a couple of weeks before. So I had breakfast at the old diner, then drove the hour and a half back to my new home, where I caught my wife sleeping in. Night before last, I went to the backyard to bring the dog into the house. Autopilot moved my feet 10 or so steps out the door, telling the dog to come in. My brain then caught up and remembered the dog was in bed, and I was indeed approaching a black bear that was eating watermelon rinds from the trash can. What was the bear's reaction? Honestly, not a whole hell of a lot. My shoe bear was decidedly not effective. He just stared at me while continuing to munch. Gladly, my more level-headed and awake other half shooed me back inside and got rid of the bear. I used to work at McDonald's drive-thru. 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So I had been hardwired to say, "Welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you today?" Every single time I heard the headset beep. Straight up Pavlovian. One day, there was a particularly wily fly that was always just a second ahead of me. I became very focused on killing this fly. I don't know how many times I said it, before a coworker finally stopped laughing long enough to tell me, but it turns out I'd been saying, "Welcome to McDonald's. How can I kill you today?" to every car in the drive-thru. Not one customer even paused or acknowledged the fact that Ronald McDonald threatened them with murder. They just wanted their goddamn nuggets. Grabbed milk from the fridge. Grabbed a dinner plate from the cupboard. Began tilting the gallon jug toward the dish. Was about to pour myself a plate of milk, when my mom walks by and asks what the duck I'm doing. Trying to get into a random person's car because I thought it was my friend's. The person whose car I was attempting to break into was very terrified. Coworker of mine told me about the last time he went to the cinema. As he was walking out, he hit the remote unlock for his truck, then watched a few seconds later as the guy and his wife climbed into his vehicle. Theirs was parked 2 stalls further down, was an identical vehicle, and the guy had hit his unlock at the same second and watched my buddy's lights flash. They shared a good laugh about it. The two that come to mind are while playing Xbox, I got up to get a drink, Then sit back down and can't find my freaking controller. I'm tearing cushions apart, looking under stuff, looking in drawers, etc. Turns out, I took a soda out of the fridge and put the controller in the spot I took it from. The other one happened the other day. Drove home from work, parked, went upstairs, opened the door, started to take off shirt. Then I remembered it was the middle of my shift and I hadn't left to go home, but just go buy a drink. Walked into the bathroom at work to pee, and instead of unzipping my fly, iron buttoned my dress shirt, took it off, then took off my white undershirt as well. Then realized I was standing shirtless at a urinal, and, what the duck? 1. Unwrap candy. 2. Throw candy in trash. 3. Stare at wrapper. My roommate strained the bones out of a 6-hour chicken stock yesterday. The stock went down the drain, and he was left with the bones. I once got my car impounded via brain autopilot. I lived across the street from a gas station and didn't drive very often. Once I was filling it up, went inside to buy something, forgot I was getting gas, and walked home. A few days later I reported my car stolen, since I couldn't find it in the apartment garage. About a month later I get a call from the police, saying my car had gone up for auction, and only then was it discovered it had been reported stolen. I had to pay about $1,500 in impound fees to get it back. Definitely one of the dumbest things I've ever done. My sister had a brain fart and left the water running in the kitchen. I went to turn it off, and flipped the kitchen light switch. Repeatedly. Then started cussing when the switch wouldn't cut the water off. Then got my toolbox, and started taking the faceplate off the light switch so I could see why it wasn't cutting the water off. At that point my other sister, who witnessed all of this, kindly pointed out that I had lost my ever-loving mind, and cut the water off herself. I've thrown laundry detergent in the dryer on multiple occasions. I'm also used to starting the morning coffee for the whole office at 6 AM in the morning. One time I was late and autopiloted to the kitchenette. I tossed out a pot of freshly made coffee, and started another pot. This wasn't my own autopilot, but the most bizarre has got to be when an ex-girlfriend's dad dropped off my ex's kid at my house. I've only met the dad a handful of times before. He just drove up to my driveway, let the kid out, waved at me, and drove off. After an awkward phone call, we ended up getting pizza and hanging out until the ex got off work to pick her son up. Sometimes I will see something out of the corner of my eye, and apparently your brain kind of does an autofill and tells you what you're seeing, without actually seeing it. So I will be walking my dog and see a bush or something, and think to myself for a split second, oh, there's an ostrich across the street. Then I'm like, what the duck is an ostrich doing here? And realize it's just a bush. It's worse when your brain autofills when in the dark, everything turns into demon. I made the best ever chicken stock, lovingly simmered for 24 hours. Then, without thinking, I put the colander in the sink and tipped the stock down the drain, saving the scraps. I cried. It was 2 AM and way past bedtime, and I'd pulled an all-nighter the previous night too. While finally clearing the table I was playing video games on, I decided to put all the water bottles away that had been out for days and days. I tossed the empty ones, but my cat was being rambunctious and trying to open the trash can, so I picked her up. I was holding my cat and putting some unfinished water bottles back in the fridge. She struggled free and hopped onto the counter, but I was too tired to scold her, so I continued grabbing huge amounts, 6 or 7 at a time, both hands, of half-full water bottles from the counter and into the fridge. I pick them up, I put them in the fridge, I pick them up, I put them in the fridge, I pick her up, I put her in the fridge. I close the fridge. I take 2 minutes to finish up the dishes. I turn off the kitchen light. I hear faint meowing. I wake up. I open the fridge. She is so cold, but she is okay. Now every time I open the ducking fridge, she climbs in. Sometimes I don't notice her, and she's strapped for a moment until I hear meowing. And I know it's all my fault. Edit, to clarify that I don't just start new water bottles halfway through. It's over days and days. I am currently at university and live on the 5th floor of a dormitory. All the floors are identical, other than the colors of the paint on the wall. One day I was taking the elevator up to the 5th floor and I was sending a text to my mother. When I arrived at my floor, a person I had never seen before got on the elevator. I consciously noted that it was weird, because I knew everyone on my floor, but I walked to my room and walked in. My living room seemed slightly off, and then a girl walked into the living room and casually goes, "What are you doing in my room?" That's when I realized I had gotten off on an earlier floor, and I just absent-mindedly walked into someone else's room. Needless to say, I got out of that room really fast after realizing what I had done. During a period when I was unemployed for a few months, I got into the habit of undoing my trousers before arriving at the bathroom. This led to a very embarrassing situation I found myself in when I became employed again, and just undid my belt and trousers in the hallway while heading to the toilet. Thankfully I realized what I was doing before I exposed myself to my new co-workers.